Everyone in the city feared the billionaire who owned everything, and everyone who worked for him shook with fear until one day a new black waitress walked in with nothing but courage in her eyes, and within minutes she did what no one had ever done before. She silenced the man everyone feared. The evening air around Sterling Tower carried the scent of money and fear. Every person who entered the Golden Glass building knew that inside on the top floor sat the one man everyone feared. Jonathan pierced the billionaire with eyes as cold as marble and a temper sharp as fire. His restaurant, the Monarch, was not only a dining place, it was a symbol of his control and arrogance. Every staff member moved with military precision, every word measured, every smile forced, because one mistake meant being fired, humiliated, or worse. That night, the Monarch glowed brighter than ever. Famous politicians, business icons, and actors filled the room, each one whispering stories about Jonathan, how he once ruined a man's career over a spilled glass, how he could buy and destroy a company in an hour. He sat at his usual corner table, wearing his signature gray suit, gold watch, an expressionless face. His mere presence made the waiters tremble, the chefs panic, and the managers sweat through his tie. In the back of the restaurant, the new waitress stood nervous and calm. At once her name was Alana Brooks. She was young, black, and quiet. Her uniform looked a little too big, and her shoes worn out. She had been hired only 3 days ago, replacing another waitress who had burst into tears and never returned. Alana had heard the stories too about Jonathan, the man who could silence a room with one look, but she had promised herself she would not be like the others. She needed this job, and she would not let fear take her voice. The manager, a nervous man named Carl, rushed over to her table, his voice low and quick. Alana, table 7 belongs to Mr. Pierce himself. Do not look him in the eye. Do not talk unless spoken to. Keep your head down and move fast. Understand? He said. Alana nodded quietly, but there was something in her eyes, something that made Carl uneasy. Not fear, not arrogance, but calm power, the kind of quiet strength that made others stop and wonder. She walked to Jonathan's table, carefully carrying a silver tray with his usual drink, a glass of 1962 scotch, and a slice of lemon, placed precisely at the edge. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath as she approached. Jonathan glanced up, just slightly, his piercing eyes studying her. She felt the air tighten around her chest, but she did not look away. She placed the drink on his table with gentle grace and said softly, "Your order, sir." For the first time in years, someone had spoken to him with neither fear nor flattery. It was a simple sentence, but it hit Jonathan like thunder. He stared at her, confused, his voice low. "What did you say?" She repeated calmly, "Your order, sir." The silence in the restaurant was so thick it could be felt. Every waiter stopped moving. Every sound faded. Jonathan's hand froze over the glass. He studied her again, trying to decide if she was brave or foolish. He leaned back slightly and smirked. "You are new here, aren't you?" "Yes, sir," she said. He smirked again, his tone sharp. "Do you know who I am?" Alana replied, "Yes, sir. Everyone does, but everyone forgets who they are trying to impress." The words hung in the air like fire. No one in the Monarch had ever dared to speak to him like that. Jonathan's smirk vanished for a second, replaced by shock, then curiosity. He leaned forward and said softly, "Say that again." Alana met his gaze, steady and fearless. She said, "I said, sometimes people forget who they are trying to impress." Jonathan stared at her, and for the first time in years, he had no reply. The restaurant remained silent, like a frozen painting, the customers watching, the staff trembling, waiting for his explosion. But it did not come. Jonathan Pierce just sat there in stunned silence while the new black waitress calmly turned and walked away. After that night, the Monarch was never the same. The silence that followed Alana's words still haunted the golden walls. Every employee whispered about her courage. Some called her foolish, some called her brave, but no one could deny that for the first time the untouchable Jonathan Pierce had been silenced by someone he could have fired with a snap of his fingers. Jonathan sat alone long after everyone left. His drink, untouched, his reflection in the glass, seemed smaller, weaker. The words replayed in his head like a haunting melody. Everyone forgets who they are trying to impress. He had faced rivals, politicians, enemies, but no one had ever spoken truth into his face so calmly. He hated the way those words made him feel, as if a mirror had been placed before him, and for once he did not like what he saw. The next morning, Alana came to work as if nothing had happened. She tied her apron neatly and began arranging tables the same way she had done every day. Her calm presence annoyed the manager Carl, who expected her to be gone by now. Jonathan had fired people for far less, but to everyone's shock, she still had a job. By noon, the restaurant buzzed again, whispers spreading like wildfire. Mr. Pierce himself had called to say the new waitress was to continue working her usual shift. Everyone looked at her with disbelief, some even envy. She had done what no one dared and somehow survived. Later that evening, Jonathan walked into the restaurant earlier than usual. His eyes searched the floor until they found her. He called out to Carl, "Bring that waitress to my table." Carl nearly tripped on his way to the kitchen. "Alana, Mr. Pierce wants to see you again. Be careful this time," he whispered. She nodded and walked to the table, her steps slow and deliberate. Jonathan looked up with that same unreadable face. He said, "Sit." She blinked, unsure if she heard right. He repeated, "Sit." She sat across from him, and for a moment neither spoke. He studied her again, like he was trying to understand how someone so quiet could shake his world. Finally, he said, "You are not afraid of me, are you?" She said, "No, sir. Fear makes people forget their worth. I do not want to forget mine." His brow furrowed. Her words again struck deep. He asked, "Where did you learn to speak like that?" She smiled softly. "Life teaches you when no one else does." He leaned back, half smiling, half curious. He said, "You are an interesting one, Alana Brooks." She replied, "Thank you, sir, but I am just here to work." He laughed quietly for the first time in years, not a mocking laugh, but something almost real. The staff around the room stared in disbelief. Jonathan Pierce laughing at a waitress. Over the next few weeks, something strange happened. Jonathan began visiting the restaurant daily, sometimes sitting silently watching Alana work, sometimes calling her over just to talk. He asked about her family, her dreams, her thoughts. She always spoke simply, yet her words carried weight. Every conversation left him thoughtful. He started changing in small ways. He stopped shouting at employees. He tipped generously. He even smiled once or twice. Rumors spread that the ruthless billionaire had gone soft, all because of a black waitress with courage in her eyes. But Alana never sought attention. She did her job quietly each night, walking home through the city lights to her small apartment where her younger brother waited. She worked not for fame or favor, but for him to pay his school fees, to give him a chance. She had seen enough cruelty in life to know power meant nothing without kindness. One evening, as the restaurant filled with wealthy guests, Jonathan asked her to bring him his dinner. She did, as usual, but as she turned to leave, she overheard two businessmen mocking her, whispering loud enough to be heard, "Look at her acting like she belongs here. Maybe she thinks she can charm the boss." Jonathan's head snapped up, but before he could speak, Alana turned and faced them. She said softly, "Gentlemen, some of us do not need to charm anyone to earn respect." The entire table went quiet. Jonathan stared at her again, amazed. Every word she spoke had the weight of truth. The businessmen stammered apologies. She simply nodded and walked away. That night, Jonathan could not sleep. He looked out his penthouse window, thinking of her courage, her dignity. He realized that everyone feared him because he ruled with money, but she had power that came from something money could never buy. And deep down, he felt something he had not felt in years: shame and admiration. The next morning came with soft rain dripping against the tall glass windows of the Monarch. Jonathan arrived earlier than usual, his face calm but thoughtful. The entire staff froze, pretending to polish silver or rearrange flowers, when in truth they were watching him. He sat in his corner table, and instead of demanding coffee, he simply waited, his eyes searching for one face. Alana walked in moments later, her apron neat, her hair tied up, and her expression focused. She felt his eyes on her, but kept working, clearing tables, arranging menus. Jonathan finally spoke. "Alana, join me for a moment, please." She hesitated only for a second before walking toward him. The quiet around them was heavy. Even the rain outside seemed to hush as she sat down across from him. He said softly, "I have met people who run empires, who rule nations, but none of them ever made me question myself the way you have." "How do you do that?" she said calmly. "I only speak what I believe, are truth is the one thing that can silence anyone when spoken with peace." Jonathan stared at her for a long time before speaking again. "Do you know what people call me?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. They call you a king in business, but also a tyrant." He laughed bitterly. "That they do," he said, "but power gets lonely. Sometimes you start to think people respect you, but in truth they only fear you." He leaned forward, his voice quieter. "Have you ever feared anyone, Alana?" She looked at him, and said only God, and the choices I failed to make right. That silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Jonathan felt something shift inside him. He could not explain it, but he knew this woman was changing him piece by piece. Later that day, the monarch hosted a private dinner, an event attended by elite investors from around the world. It was a night meant to impress, to seal a deal worth billions. Alana worked, as usual, but tension ran high. The guests, arrogant, demanding, and loud. Jonathan watched her move between tables, graceful, unshaken. She served wine, with a smile, even as one of the guests mocked her accent. Another snapped fingers to rush her like a servant. Jonathan's hands clenched beneath the table. He could feel the old version of himself, rising, the man who thrived on control and pride. But Alana's calmness stopped him. He waited to see what she would do. One guest, a tall man in a white suit, leaned back and said loudly, "Jonathan, my friend, you really allow anyone to serve here these days? This one should be cleaning floors, not serving millionaires." The room erupted in laughter. Jonathan's jaw tightened, but Alana turned slowly, her eyes calm and kind. She said quietly, "Maybe the floors would shine brighter if people like you walked on them with respect." The laughter died. Instantly, the air turned heavy. Jonathan froze. Every guest at that table looked away, embarrassed. The man in the white suit fumbled for words. Jonathan stood slowly and said, "That will be enough," his tone low and steady. "She is right." The night ended in silence, but something inside Jonathan had transformed completely. He watched her leave the room, her steps steady, her head high. She had not only silenced a guest, she had reminded him what leadership truly meant. Later, when everyone was gone, Jonathan walked into the kitchen, where she was washing glasses. He stood at the doorway, unsure of what to say. Finally, he spoke. "Thank you for today." She smiled. "You do not need to thank me, sir. I only said what needed to be said." He nodded slowly, but his voice softened. "You reminded me of something I forgot long ago. Respect is not demanded, it is earned." For a moment, they stood in quiet understanding, two people from different worlds, bound by truth and courage. That night, Jonathan could not sleep again. He walked through his empty penthouse, thinking of her words, of her calm defiance, and of his own reflection. For years, he had been a man everyone feared. Now, he wanted to become the man someone like her could respect. The city lights below looked different that night, softer, quieter, as if even they were waiting for what would come next. A week later, the monarch hosted a charity dinner, an event filled with powerful names and flashing cameras. It was meant to honor Jonathan's contribution to several orphan programs. Yet deep down, he knew it was all for image, not heart, until now. As guests filled the golden hall, Jonathan sat at his table, distracted, his eyes following Alana across the floor. She moved like calm music, each gesture graceful, each smile real. Among all the glitter and arrogance, she was the only thing genuine in that room. During the dinner, a well-known investor began to speak loudly, mocking the staff, calling them uneducated, worthless people. Jonathan's hands tightened on his glass, but before he could intervene, Alana stepped forward, her tone calm, her face steady. "Sir," she said softly, "perhaps if people learned to serve with kindness, the world would not need charity in the first place." The room went still again, just like the first night Jonathan met her. Her words cut through the air like a blade wrapped in silk. The investor turned red in embarrassment. The crowd whispered. Jonathan slowly stood and said clearly, "She is right. Tonight is not about image, it is about humanity." Everyone watched as the man they once feared now stood beside a waitress, defending her with quiet strength. Jonathan lifted his glass and said to Alana and to everyone like her, the ones who serve with dignity, "You remind us all what true power is." The room erupted in quiet applause. Alana bowed her head slightly and continued her work, but that moment would echo in the hearts of everyone present. The next morning, Jonathan arrived before sunrise, the restaurant empty, except for Alana, who was cleaning tables. She looked up surprised. He smiled faintly. "You always come early." She said, "The same could be asked of you, sir." He nodded, then took a deep breath. "Alana, I built this empire with fear. Now I want to build something else. Will you help me?" She looked puzzled. "How could I help you, sir?" he said, "By teaching me what respect really means." For the first time, she smiled fully, a warm, real smile that softened his face. He said, "I am reopening this restaurant under new management." "Yours?" She froze, unable to believe what she heard. He said calmly, "I am stepping down from daily control. You will run the monarch. I will invest, but you will lead it with the same heart you showed me." Tears filled her eyes, not of weakness, But gratitude, she whispered. Why me? He replied, because you're the only one who silenced me without raising your voice. Months passed. The monarch changed. Completely gone was the fear in the air, replaced by laughter, kindness, and teamwork. Under Alana's leadership, the restaurant became the most respected in the city. Jonathan visited often, not as a ruler, but as a friend. Every time he saw her, he felt peace. And people still whispered about the day when everyone feared the millionaire until the new black waitress completely silenced him. Like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us real strength comes from kindness and truth.